This is Story Recapped. Today I'm going to explain a fantasy mystery thriller film called Lady in the Water. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care.
According to legends, humans were once linked with people who live in the water. Those who resided in the water foretold the future and inspired humans. However, humans separated from them because of their desire to own everything. Wars broke out without inspiration from those in the water. After some time, the people from the water reached out to humans again. They sent their young ones into the world of humans in the dead of night. Humans only need a glimpse of the people from the water to be inspired, but it comes at great risk to their lives. Even though some do not return, the people in the water keep sending their young ones to help humans. Cleveland Heap, an apartment building superintendent, is called to deal with a large bug at the De La Torre residence. After he squashes the bug, Perez de la Torre and his daughters express their gratitude for protecting them. Later, Cleveland takes a new tenant, Harry Farber, to his apartment. He introduces Harry to some of the tenants along the way. Cleveland tells Harry to wait for him by the stairwell when the pool man arrives. The pool man informs Cleveland that the water is slick because people could be taking bubble baths. Cleveland complains that people might be swimming in the pool at night, which is forbidden. When he returns to Harry, he finds the new tenant speaking with Reggie, who only exercises one side of his body for an experiment. Upon reaching Harry's apartment, Cleveland asks him why he came to Philadelphia. Harry reveals that the local paper hired him as the book and film critic. That night, Cleveland hears splashing in the pool, so he comes out to investigate. A woman emerges, but she quickly goes back into the water. Cleveland tells her to come out repeatedly. When she doesn't emerge, Cleveland gets worried that she might drown, so he goes in after her. After failing to find the woman, Cleveland comes out of the pool, but he trips and falls back into the water. Later, Cleveland wakes up in his apartment and sees a woman on his couch. He asks her where she's from, so she discloses that she's from the blue world. The woman asks if he feels an awakening and tells him that it will feel like pins and needles pricking him from the inside. The woman, who introduces herself as Story, surmises that Cleveland is not the person she's looking for since he doesn't feel any different. However, Cleveland, who normally stutters when he speaks, notices that he's not stuttering while talking to Story. Cleveland tells Story that she can leave, but she's scared, so Cleveland allows her to stay for a while. After a few hours, Cleveland asks Story to leave again, but she clings to him. When he asks who she is, Story notes that she's a Narf. Cleveland brings Story outside to lay her by the pool, but he encounters a wolf-like creature, so he runs back to his apartment with Story in his arms. The next day, he reports the sighting of the creature to animal control. Cleveland reveals that the creature was large and had green hair. Later, Cleveland asks a college student named Choi Young-soon to look up the word Narf. Young-soon reveals that the word came from a bedtime story that her grandmother used to tell her. With Young-soon translating, her mother, Mrs. Choi, explains that her grandmother told the story as if it was true. The Narf is a sea nymph who has to appear to a human vessel chosen for her to awaken the person's mind. If the Narf succeeds, she will return to her world with a giant eagle known as the Great Eatlon. When Cleveland returns home, he asks Story about the person she's supposed to meet. Story doesn't know what the person looks like, but she notes that the person is an important writer. Cleveland then asks Harry about his job, but Harry hasn't written anything in a long time. However, Harry shares that his neighbor, Mrs. Bell, has written a book. Later, Cleveland talks to Mrs. Bell while cleaning the railings in front of her apartment. As they talk, a butterfly lands on her shoulders. When Cleveland asks Mrs. Bell about her book, she notes that it's been out of print for 20 years, and she hasn't written anything else. Cleveland then stops by the apartment of Mr. Dury, who's busy solving crossword puzzles, while his son, Joey, is analyzing the drawings on a cereal box. When Cleveland learns that Mr. Dury is not a writer, he gets desperate and asks a group of potheads if they write, but none of them have written anything. Later, Young-soon informs Cleveland that her mother told her more about the bedtime story. Cleveland asks Young-soon if she's writing a paper for her class, but her course doesn't require her to write anything. She then reveals that Narfs are in danger from creatures called scrunts when they're out of the water. Humans do not notice scrunts because their backs are covered in grass and appear as bumps in the lawns. While Story waits for Cleveland to find the writer, she discovers his journal and reads it. When Cleveland bumps into a tenant named Vic, he remembers that he's writing something. While fixing the light in Vic's apartment, Cleveland takes a peek into his folder and learns that he's writing his thoughts about world leaders and cultural problems into his book called The Cookbook. When Cleveland gets home, Story expresses her sadness over Cleveland's wife and children, who were killed during a robbery at his home. Story has also discovered that he was once a doctor, but he has stopped his practice after losing his purpose. Story asserts that Cleveland's purpose is to help everyone in the apartment, but he contends that anybody can do his job. Cleveland then tells Story that he found the vessel she's looking for. After introducing Vic to her, Cleveland notices that Vic appears distraught, so he asks if he feels pins and needles pricking him. When he confirms that he does, Story tells Vic that she's glad they met. Soon after Vic leaves, Cleveland asks Story not to mention his family's death again because no one else knows about it. Later, Cleveland gets called to the Bubchick residence to fix the toilet. Mrs. Bubchick tells Cleveland to wait because her husband is having gas issues. When Cleveland points out that the toilet is broken, Mrs. Bubchick remarks that her husband must be looking at the mirror because something is growing on his bum. Mr. Bubchick then tells his wife that he called a plumber earlier to fix the toilet, so Cleveland leaves. That night, Story tells Cleveland that she can leave without fear of being attacked by the Skrunt because their laws will keep her safe. However, Cleveland is not allowed to watch. Cleveland takes the garbage from the trash cans while Story waits by the pool. Moments later, he sees Story running to the stairwell to hide. Cleveland notices scratches on her legs, so he asks if the Skrunt caught her, but she wouldn't speak. The Skrunt suddenly emerges and attacks them, so they quickly run upstairs. Cleveland decides to take Story to Vic's apartment to keep her safe from the Skrunt. Cleveland then stops by Young Soon's apartment to ask about treating a wounded Narf. Young Soon isn't home, but Mrs. Choi calls her on the phone and gives it to Cleveland. When he asks her mother about the Narf, Mrs. Choi reveals that Skrunts have poison that can kill Narfs, but they can be cured with a mud called Ki. She notes that Ki can be found where the Narfs live. When Cleveland asks how to prevent a Skrunt from attacking a Narf, Mrs. Choi explains that Skrunts are afraid of the Tartutic, simian-like creatures that enforce the law in the blue world. However, there are rogue Skrunts who are willing to break the laws. Later, Cleveland swims in the pool and takes out the drainage to find Story's dwelling place. After going through a tunnel, he finds Ki among several objects left by tenants by the pool. He also finds a few empty glasses with nothing but air. When he tries to go back to the surface, he finds that the door is closed, so he takes a pen and uses the tube to inhale the oxygen from a glass before forcing the door open and swimming back to the surface. When Young Soon gets home, she tells Cleveland that her mother told her more about the story. She advises Cleveland to act like an innocent child next time to convince Mrs. Choi to tell him all about Narfs. Young Soon then explains that Skrunts only risk breaking the laws of the blue world when they come across the Madame Narf. Their vessels are said to be important because they cause tremendous change. Additionally, the Madame Narf becomes the queen upon their return to their world, so Skrunts will do anything they can to kill her. Young Soon notes that Narfs are not aware if they're the Madame Narf because no one in the blue world is told about who they are. When Cleveland takes the key to Story, he tells her that he must be someone important. He then tells Vic and his sister, Anna, that Story is a Narf. Story tells Vic that his book will inspire a boy who will grow to be the nation's president. His book will become the seeds of change because the leader will tell the world about it. The following day, Cleveland stops by Young Soon's apartment to ask her mother about Narfs. He follows Young Soon's advice to act childish so that Mrs. Choi would be more eager to tell him the story. After hearing the story from Mrs. Choi, Cleveland stops by Vic's apartment to ask Story to confirm the things he heard. Since Story can't tell anyone about the blue world, Anna advises her to use body language to tell them if Mrs. Choi's story is accurate. Cleveland recounts that the Narf came to a preordained place and must leave from the same spot. He then notes that humans with powers can help Story, and these people are unconsciously drawn to live near the vessel. Story confirms that a guardian, a symbolist, and a guild can help her return to her world, but these people have no idea about their respective roles. Since Cleveland saved her life, Story believes that he is the guardian. Cleveland recalls that there's also a healer who can awaken the life force in everything, and they will recognize the healer because butterflies are drawn to them. Story then hints that she has one chance to return to her world because the Great Etlon will only come back one last time. Cleveland soon visits Harry to ask him how to recognize the symbolists and guilds in movies. Harry notes that symbolists are good at solving puzzles while guilds will always be seen in groups. Later, Cleveland takes Mr. Dury, Mrs. Bell, and the group of potheads to see Story and asks them to help her get home. Cleveland then asks Mr. Dury to interpret his crossword puzzles because the symbolist should use instruments he's familiar with. Mr. Dury then solves the puzzles to develop a plan for Story's departure. He surmises that they should have a party to confuse the Skrunt. Then, they would distract the partygoers with a music performance so that no one would see Story when the Great Etlon comes for her. Mr. Dury is not confident about the plan, but Cleveland thinks his powers worked. Cleveland then surmises that the guild is supposed to organize the party. Later that night, Cleveland decides to find the Scrunt to know how to deal with it the next day. Using a walkie-talkie, Story instructs Cleveland to find the Scrunt's eyes through a mirror. When he finds it, she tells him to walk backward and face the Scrunt when he is close enough. Then she asks him to utter the words Nephra Mora to challenge the Scrunt. After the Scrunt accepts the challenge, Story instructs Cleveland to look directly into the animal's eyes to hypnotize it. She notes that the Scrunt will stay frozen or step backward due to the hypnotism. The Scrunt, however, keeps moving forward, so she tells Cleveland to run. The Scrunt almost gets him, but it disappears when Harry arrives. Story realizes that Cleveland is not the guardian. While Cleveland informs the residents about the party, a reclusive tenant named Mr. Leeds tells him that he knows about what happened to his family. Mr. Leeds advises Cleveland not to give up and stop hiding to avoid ending up like him. Meanwhile, Vic realizes that he will die before his book becomes popular because Story never said that he'd meet the future president. He surmises that someone will kill him because not everyone would love his ideas. When Story confirms his eventual demise, Vic asks her not to tell his sister. As the crowd gathers outside for the party, Story expresses doubt that she's the Madame Narf because people make fun of her in the blue world. Cleveland, however, assures her that she's meant to lead because she's brave and does what she thinks is right. Soon, Story senses the Great Etlon's imminent arrival, so Cleveland brings her to the pool. Things start to go wrong as Story waits for the Great Etlon. Anna loses her mirror while she's on the lookout for the Scrunt, and they can't signal the band to start the musical performance. Not long, Cleveland notices that Story is missing. By the time he finds her, the Scrunt is dragging her away. Cleveland brings Story inside the building so that Mrs. Bell can heal her. However, nothing happens when she touches Story's wounds. Elsewhere, Harry comes across the Scrunt inside the building while looking for the bathroom. The Scrunt can't hide in his environment, so it has no choice but to attack him. Soon, it becomes clear to the group that the roles they were assigned with are wrong. However, Mr. Dury realizes that the symbolist is his son, so he takes the group to his apartment. While analyzing cereal boxes, Joey figures out that they need the guild composed of 7 sisters to conduct a ceremony. They also need a witness who has no secrets and another one whose opinion is highly respected. The group then asks the De La Torre sisters, Young Soon, Mr. Leeds, and Mr. Bubchick, to help. Outside the building, rain starts falling, so all the partygoers go inside. After gathering up the new group, Cleveland discloses that Mr. Bubchick is the man without secrets, and Mr. Leeds is the man he respects for his opinions. He then asks Young Soon and Anna to join the De La Torre sisters to form the guild. Joey suddenly informs them that a man is supposed to lead the ceremony to strengthen the guild. Cleveland gets confused because he is sure that Mrs. Bell is the one who is supposed to lead them because she is the healer who will awaken their life force. He points out that a butterfly was drawn to her, but Mrs. Bell contends that Cleveland was the one who brought the butterfly to her that day. Cleveland refuses to believe that he's the healer, but the group urges him to try. As he embraces Story, Mrs. Bell tells him to say something to bring out her energy. Cleveland expresses his regret for not being there to protect his family. He says that his family would have loved meeting Story because she's like an angel. Not long, Story's wounds disappear. Soon after she gets up, the guild gathers outside and arm themselves with mops and brooms to protect Story from the Scrunt. After expressing her gratitude to everyone helping her, Story tells Vic that Anna will have 7 children, and Vic will live to see the first 2. Soon, the Scrunt sees the group outside the building. After breaking through the door, the Scrunt runs toward Cleveland and Story. As Cleveland picks up a mop to defend Story, he realizes that the Scrunt is frozen in place. When he turns around, he sees Reggie behind him. Cleveland immediately realizes that Reggie is the guardian, so he urges him to keep looking in the Scrunt's eyes. The Scrunt backs away as Reggie approaches it. However, Reggie gets distracted by the Great Etlon's arrival. The Scrunt lunges toward him, but 4 Tartutics suddenly jump down from a tree and attack the animal. Not long, the Tartutics carry the Scrunt deep into the woods. Cleveland embraces Story and thanks her for saving his life before the Great Etlon carries her away. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.